Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami. The deeper we practice, the deeper our practice gets, the more we find out that there's nothing to hold on to. Nothing. Ideas about ourselves, about who we are, where we come from, what it is that we're supposed to be experiencing, we're supposed to be achieving. All of those things fall apart as we try to grope, we try to hold on to something, an idea, a teaching even, deep level, on an experiential level. And then we start seeing how anicca is, well, it has so many subtle aspects to itself. Even in the practice, where there's nothing to hold on to. But by nature, we have a propensity, we have a drive to grasp, to hold on to things. Even if you look at a tiny little amoeba, tiny little cell under a microscope, you see that it is trying to reach out for the universe around it. It has tiny little hair-like things, villi, and all these things that are like its fingers. It's trying to grasp, whether it's food, whether it's ideas, whether it's how far have I gotten in my practice? Am I on the right path? And that's where we have a lot of comparing, a lot of comparison. It's part of our nature as human beings. It's part of our nature as ignorant human beings who have not yet become free from the asavas, from ignorance specifically. So when I suggest, I encourage you to be forgiving towards yourself, please bear in mind that part of you that is constantly in comparing mode. Comparing perhaps to your older version and now, and especially the version that you have in mind about yourself in the future, meaning the goals. Sounds familiar? I'm supposed to be at this level. I'm supposed to be here. I'm supposed to have gotten to this point, and I'm not there yet. When is this going to happen? That has elements of spiritual greed in it. Greed, nevertheless. Impatience has everything to do with greed. But above all, it has a lot to do with conceit. Mana, asmi mana. I am this. And usually, I don't like this. So we're trying to always fix ourselves, always, always, always trying to get a different version, always trying to make new version 0.0 of ourselves. Now, of course, the drive to improve oneself, that is not under question. That is not something we need to relinquish working on. That is necessary. That is called that is why Lord Buddha uses the word bhavana, which is cultivation. Cultivation of what? Sila, samadhi, panya. Those are always with us. We cultivate. When we're working on the mundane level of the precepts, mundane, whatever is observable, not to drink, not to get intoxicated, not to cheat, not to lie, not to kill. Okay, these are valuable, important aspects of the foundational parts of protecting our sila. But then Lord Buddha talks about how to carry that deeper, deeper into our psyche, into our beingness. Where sila becomes heightened. That's cultivation. Similarly with samadhi, the mental cultivation, the practice of meditation. Earlier I mentioned, I gave you the prompt of own your awareness, own it. No one can do that for you. Who's going to do it? The neighbor? The neighbor's dog? The future version of you that you keep comparing yourself to? And then end up feeling crushed because you look at that version and you look at this version and it's like, I have a long way to go. And that creates a lot of discontent in the mind. And that is none other than the source of suffering. So we suffer. So as we're practicing, my encouragement is for you to check to see if there's any sense of frustration within you, whether during meditation or when you're not engaged in meditation proper, you're engaged with life. Is there a smidgen, a tiny little speck of frustration within you on some level? That has everything to do with man, the conceit. In the book of the Sixes of the Anguttara Nikaya, Lord Buddha talks about what holds a person from becoming an arahant, keeps them from becoming an arahant, fully awakened. Fourth stage, awakened being, fully awakened. The first is that tendency within us to compare and contrast. I am equal to you. We are equals, basically. But first we scan the territory, we scan the person, we look at characteristics, traits, and then we usually are comparing them to ours, which we're master of. Delineating and knowing and saying, yes, I have those qualities. Oh, so does this person. So do you. Okay. Back and forth, checking and checking and checking. That is considered within the Dhamma as conceit, comparing and contrasting. Because you've actually relinquished working on yourself. You're playing around, you're wasting time. You're not practicing the Dhamma. You're not living the Dhamma. Again, you're holding on to something. An image that you want to happen. Or by me picking you out and saying, you are equal to me and I'm equal to you, now I can feel a little bit more comfortable with myself, safe and secure because I'm not alone anymore. Do you see the subtle psychological games we are playing? Because there is that tendency to not want to be alone. And if you recall from the sutta that we covered last year about the thoughts of a great man, where we looked at Venerable Anuruddha's thoughts, and he listed 7, and then Lord Buddha comes in and lists the 8th, where he talks about the papanchas. This path, he says, is for someone who's satisfied with little. This path is for someone who seeks seclusion, something that modern human beings are terrified of on a deep level. Hence, conceit is such an important part of our evolution. By the way, the 8th characteristic that Lord Buddha came in to point out to Venerable Anuruddha, if you remember, it was about the papanchas. This path is for someone who delights in nippapancha, non-proliferation of concepts. So the first thing that is a major obstacle on the path of someone who wants to attain arahantship is conceit, or the comparing and contrasting. You and I are the same. The second major obstacle is the superiority complex or superiority conceit, where I look down upon you or this person. Oh, I am better than this. My meditation skills are far greater than that person or yours. Oh, you have a lot to catch up to get to where I am mentality. Of course, rarely do you find a person in this day and age who will say that out loud. And then the third obstacle is the opposite of that, where you look up, where you are the inferior, looking at the superior. I have such a long way to go to get to your level. That's considered conceit in this Dhamma and discipline of Lord Buddha's. So you have 3 aspects of conceit: equal, superior, inferior. And then we have the overestimation of oneself and one's skills, one's level of understanding, one's level of wisdom. In fact, if there is wisdom, then the person would not overestimate themselves, would they? And this is a major obstacle. Usually it happens with individuals who have even entered the stream. People can get stuck because of these, so far, the 4 obstacles that I mentioned. So the 4th one is overestimation. thinking so highly of oneself. And then comes the fifth one, where the person is obstinate, is rigid, non-flexible. You can even say opposite of humble. There's arrogance in it. That is a big obstacle, especially when it goes underground, when it's being suppressed so that it doesn't show, where the person becomes a holier than thou, but on a subtle level. On the outside, they might look like they are very humble. But when I encourage you constantly to go ahead and ask yourself that question, what is my attitude? What is my attitude? When we ask that question, automatically we are opening, well, turning on the light on any one of these if they're there. And usually they're there if we are not arahants. Hence, Lord Buddha's mention of this. And then comes the sixth obstacle, which has to do with how you view yourself in general, in life. And specifically, the term is self-abasement or servility, being servile, always being in this position. Yes, 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 I'm a nothing, I'm an ant, I'm a nothing, I'm a worm next to you. And that has a lot of psychological issues attached to it. It could come from our childhood and not getting enough affirmations from our caretakers. It could be a slew of different reasons that might have turned that into a reality for the person. Or it could be a tendency from past lives, even, ultimately it's the sankharas we're talking about. The habitual pattern of the mind. So these six, we have to be careful of. And these are listed there, not for us to kind of add more things on our lists and say, oh boy, now I have 6 more to fight against. I have 5 of those, 5 hindrances, the pancha nivarana. Now I have this, I have that. No, that is an unhealthy way of looking at this teaching. It's important for us to look at whatever teaching that comes our way and see how that resonates with us at this juncture, at this point in our practice. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of having you take notes while there's a Dhamma talk going on, so that you don't miss anything. Because that also has conceit in it. The fear, I might lose something here. The greed also is in there. Greed is definitely inside of conceit. So as we practice, as our practice goes deeper, we start seeing how there's less things for us to be able to grasp, to hold on to legitimately. Things are falling apart, as it were. It's like you see something and it looks rigid and you grab hold of it and all of a sudden it turns into ash and it just gone. That is not something to dread. That is actually an aspect of wisdom developing in the person. thanks to the practice, thanks to the understanding of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila, Samadhi, Panya are having their roots become stronger, assisting your practice, assisting your development. And then we start seeing that, in fact, this is not about attaining another badge, somebody giving us a title. No, this is all about you. I was giving a talk yesterday, and to a group of people who are just getting, again, acclimated to being in an actual location, a temple, listening to a Dhamma talk from a Bhikkhu for the first time after 2+ years. And I was mentioning how important it is for us to realize, to understand how the holy life is all about separating yourself into an independent person, which has so much to do with taking on a responsible role in your life for yourself, hence owning your own awareness. Instead of relying on the rest of the hours of the day to carry you through, where you're just sitting in the passenger seat and letting things unfold, and you're just joining, for the ride, basically. You're just there. So we practice to no longer just be there. That's why we need to be holding the hand of Sati. I remember a long time ago, when I was a child, my parents decided for some reason to take me to this wedding reception. And I don't know why they did this, but it was done outdoors. It was a religious ceremony. It was at a church and in the mountains. And then it had an area outside where people gathered there and they were congratulating. So it was more of just a church ceremony, and then just outdoors under the stars. There was a lot of bright lights. It was at night. So my parents, my mom specifically, was holding my hand tightly. And I remember all I saw were just these vertical things walking around me, vertical, tall, and I was so short, people. So I was like almost there, at the height of their knees, in my height, and just like my eyes were at that level. So somehow in that commotion, I lost the grip of my mother. And years later, I would still wake up in panic. It didn't take long until my parents found me, because it was a small place anyhow. So somebody just picked me up as like, whose kid is this? So it was like 2-3 minutes they found me anyhow. But that was enough for me to just, it wreaked havoc in my mind. But we do that all the time, don't we? With our mindfulness, with our practice, we just let it go. And that's why we need to come back to it, come back to it, come back to it. Sampajanya, which usually follows after sati, sati sampajanya, right? If you remember from the Mahasatipatthana that we've covered, Lord Buddha is talking about full awareness of your body. Make every gesture you make count. Every time you open and close your eyelids, open and close your mouth, your lips, the way you say words, how you say those words. Be interested in the posture of your neck, of your throat, what's happening, how am I saying these words, how am I looking with my eyes as I'm saying these words. How about my hands? Am I using my hands? When I'm reaching over to tie my shoelaces or to open the door with my hand, which hand? And how did I reach for it? All of it could be a synonym for holding the hand of Sati, not letting go of Sati. Imagine Sati is like a baby, a child. Don't let go of the hand of the child. And if you do, quickly go after the child, reaching for the child, to grab hold of the child. These are, of course, just images, because the mind has a tendency, especially with intelligent people, where analogies and similes specifically really go deep, have more of an experiential tone to them. They register beautifully and sink in nicely in the right hemisphere, where the understanding, intelligence, and wisdom takes place thanks to relationships. And the best way to have the brain understand the nuances of relationships is through imagery. And that's why human beings evolved greatly when we sat around the campfire and stories were told by the elders. To navigate the mind, to navigate this world. So I would like to encourage you to have a wider scope of acceptance of what is supposed to be taking place in your life, and specifically in your practice, and because of your practice taking place in your life. Without letting go of Sati, because everything is just dropping anyhow. There's nothing to hold on to. That is different than what I'm suggesting with in the case of Sati. It is thanks to Sati that we will develop wisdom. And thanks to wisdom, everything else is falling apart. Everything else that is based on papanchas, based on wrong view, miccha ditti, ignorance. Ignorance. So it helps as we're practicing to see how the old stories we used to tell ourselves no longer are actually working. It's like a child who grew up and no longer wants to play with those toys. But the old tendencies are there, so long as we're not arahants. And they will try to come up with reasons why, no. Remember, those toys were beautiful. Remember, we used to spend years with those toys. And they meant so much to us. We have different boxes for them, and the boxes were labeled, etc., etc. It could be different for everybody. But essentially, they mattered to us. So we have a relationship with these things. So memories, tendencies, that's what I'm referring to. Older versions of ourselves. And this is important because the mind has a tendency, even though you have moved far beyond doing certain things, let's say breaking certain precepts, suddenly the mind throws in images at you. Thoughts, memories show up. And you're like, where did this come from? I didn't ponder this, but it just shows up. That doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your practice. It just means that you need to observe and drop it. See it for what it is and drop it. Remember the 5 aggregates? Sannyas are memories, mental associations. Sankharas are like this flood, rushing flood, like a Niagara that keeps on coming in from the old past lifetimes, tendencies. And when the mind is not grounded on sati, these things will show up. Now, it doesn't mean that you actually put an effort for these things to come up. No, it could have been triggered by something you saw, you heard. Yes, that's always a possibility, but there's also the other possibility where they just show up. Why? Because the light of sati was not turned on. The window was open and the snakes were coming in. Rats were crawling in. So sometimes meditators panic. I should have been beyond this point. What is this? Does that mean that I'm truly breaking a precept here? No. It just requires you to become more diligent with your practice. Appamada, heedfulness or diligence is required all throughout this practice. So I will pause here and ask if there are any questions about the practice, about the Dhamma, related to it. If there are any questions, just go ahead and speak. Okay. It's been for me, it's been a long few days. I've been giving Dhamma talks almost every day, and today a few of them. And now with you, and which I look forward to every week. So if there aren't any questions, we'll just move on to sharing the merits and conclude for the day. If there are no questions. Okay. So let us share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sa, sa, sa. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you and your loved ones, especially on this very special occasion of Vesak. And they really had to twist Lord Buddha's arm to get him to approve of a day like this. And he had to bundle them up together, because all the other religious founders of that time, they had all these ceremonies and dates and things. And Lord Buddha would always avoid being in the spotlight type of a thing. And he said, okay, fine. Go ahead and celebrate the Tathagata's birth, the Tathagata's awakening, and when the Tathagata is dead, go ahead and put that in there as well and celebrate it. Call it the Vesak. And that's what we do. It's you can consider it the Buddhist New Year. And it is done on Saturday and Sunday here. Different temples do it differently. So if you live close to a temple, I recommend going and visiting. But many of them nowadays are doing it online as well. So just side note, they're good beyond the rites and ritual aspect of it. It allows you to connect with the historicity of it. Perhaps for some, it might even be a little bit more grounding for the practice, to put the pieces together, as it were. Just a thought. So until next time, which next week will be Sutta exploration. I haven't yet figured out which that would be. So we'll get to it though. You will be notified, of course, and you'll get a copy of the PDF. So be well, and may the Triple Gems blessings be with you and your loved ones. Keep smiling.